In the early Roman Empire, a silver coin called the denarius contained roughly 4 grams of high-purity silver. It could buy a day's labor from a skilled craftsman. 2 centuries later, the same coin had lost most of its real value. The silver had been replaced with copper. Coated with a thin silver wash to resemble money, it no longer was. Rome didn't fall only to invasions. Its money failed long before its borders did. This is forgotten economy, where the systems that shaped empires are finally explained.
The Roman Empire at its height controlled 1.5 million square miles of territory,
From Britain to North Africa, from Spain to the Middle East. 50 million people lived under Roman rule, roughly 1/5 of the world's population. The denarius made this possible. Augustus, Rome's first emperor, standardized the currency in 27 BC. The denarius became the link coin, the medium that connected all commerce across the empire. Soldiers were paid in denarii. Taxes were collected in denarii. Trade from Britannia to Egypt moved on denarii. The coin's value came from its silver content, nearly pure silver by ancient standards. You could melt it down, and the metal itself held worth. This wasn't paper currency backed by trust. It was money that carried its own value. For nearly 2 centuries, the system worked. Rome built 50,000 miles of roads, aqueducts that still stand today, the Colosseum, the Pantheon, all of it financed through a stable monetary system. When money holds its value, empires can plan decades ahead. Infrastructure projects span generations. Trade networks stretch across continents. But the denarius had a problem built into its design. The empire's spending was limited by how much silver could be mined and minted. Military expansion brought gold and silver into Rome's treasury, plunder from conquered territories, tributes from client states, production from newly acquired mines. But by the 2nd century AD, the expansion slowed. Rome had reached the limits of what it could conquer and hold. The borders stabilized, the flow of new wealth stopped growing, but the costs kept rising. Military spending drove the pressure. A standing army of 300,000 to 600,000 legionaries required constant payment. Soldiers demanded regular wages. They expected bonuses after campaigns. Retirement packages came in the form of land grants or gold payments worth more than a decade's salary. When emperors failed to meet these expectations, armies mutinied and installed new leaders. Administrative costs added up. Bureaucrats running provinces from Gaul to Syria. Tax collectors managing revenue across 3 continents. Engineers maintaining roads and aqueducts. The logistics of empire alone consumed enormous resources. By the mid-1st century, emperors faced a choice. They couldn't raise taxes high enough to cover expenses. The population was already strained. They couldn't cut military spending without risking invasion or revolt. They couldn't expand fast enough to capture new wealth. So they chose a 4th option: debase the currency. Emperor Nero began the process in 54 AD. He reduced the silver content of the denarius by roughly 10 to 15%. The coins looked the same. They were accepted the same way. But each one contained less actual silver. Rome could now mint more coins from the same amount of metal. In the short term, this worked. The treasury had more money to spend. Soldiers received their wages on time. Building projects continued. But debasement is a one-way mechanism. Once it starts, it's nearly impossible to stop. The next emperor debased a little more. Then the next, then the next. Each reduction seemed small at the time. Each was justified by immediate financial pressure: war, reconstruction, political stability. But the cumulative effect built slowly over generations. By around 200 AD, Rome's main silver coins had lost roughly half their silver content. Then the acceleration began. The year 235 AD marks the beginning of what historians call The crisis of the 3rd century. Emperor Severus Alexander fell to a military coup in 235 AD. What followed was 50 years of chaos. More than 50 men claimed the title of emperor during this period. Most held power for mere months before being replaced by rivals. The empire fragmented into 3 separate states. Constant civil wars made the borders vulnerable. Barbarian invasions came from every direction. The plague of Cyprian swept through cities. Major urban centers like Alexandria saw catastrophic population decline. And through all of it, the currency continued to collapse. By 260 AD, the denarius contained less than 5% silver. Emperors were mixing copper with trace amounts of silver, then coating the coins to make them look valuable. By 270 AD, the silver content had fallen below 1%. The coins were nearly worthless. But Rome kept minting them anyway. Here's what happens when currency loses its value. First, prices rise. Not gradually, exponentially. Some staples increased thousands of percent over a century. A modius of wheat, about 9 liters, sold for half a denarius in the 2nd century. By the early 4th century, that same amount of wheat cost thousands of denarii. Merchants stopped trusting the coins. They demanded payment in commodities instead. Gold, silver, grain, anything with intrinsic value. The currency that had unified the empire's trade networks became useless for actual commerce. Trade collapsed. Long-distance merchants couldn't price goods reliably when currency values changed daily. Regional markets fragmented. Cities that had thrived on imported goods from across the empire reverted to local barter systems. The economy became localized, inefficient, and isolated. Tax collection failed. Rome's entire administrative system depended on taxes paid in currency. But when that currency became worthless, the state couldn't fund itself. Soldiers went unpaid. Roads fell into disrepair. Aqueducts broke down. The infrastructure that had made the empire strong began to crumble. Emperor Diocletian attempted a solution in 301 AD. He issued the Edict on Maximum Prices, comprehensive wage and price controls enforced under penalty of death. The edict fixed prices for over 1,000 goods and services, from wheat to legal fees. It failed immediately. In provinces where prices were already below the fixed maximum, nothing changed. In provinces where market prices exceeded the limit, goods simply disappeared. Merchants stopped selling. Farmers held back crops. Black markets emerged. Riots broke out in Rome itself when citizens couldn't find food at legal prices. The edict was eventually abandoned, but the damage was done. By the end of the 3rd century, Rome's economy had fundamentally changed. The cities that had been centers of trade and culture were fortifying themselves with walls, something they hadn't needed for centuries. Urban populations declined. The middle class, once the backbone of Roman civic life, was crushed between inflation and taxation. Many Romans fled the cities entirely. They placed themselves under the protection of large landowners, trading freedom for security. This created a class of semi-free workers tied to the land, an early model for medieval serfdom. The economy that had connected millions of people across 3 continents had fractured into isolated agricultural estates. Constantine eventually stabilized the currency in 312 AD with a new gold coin, the solidus. But by then, Roman society had changed completely. The solidus circulated among the wealthy and the state bureaucracy. Everyone else relied on barter or token coinage issued by local cities. A 2-tier monetary system emerged. The state and its employees used gold. The population used worthless copper or no currency at all. The unified economic system that had made Rome powerful no longer existed. When the barbarians finally sacked Rome in 476 AD, many Romans welcomed them. According to the historian Salvian, the population had one wish: to never again fall under Roman taxation and administration. The empire had become more oppressive than the invaders. Rome didn't fall because of military defeat alone. It fell because its economy could no longer sustain the state.
This pattern repeats. Currency debasement starts slowly. It always does. A government faces spending pressures, war, disaster, political instability. Raising taxes is unpopular. Cutting spending is dangerous. So they debase the currency instead. Just a little. At first, nothing happens. The coins still circulate. Commerce continues. The crisis is averted. But each debasement makes the next one easier, and each one requires a larger debasement to achieve the same effect. The process accelerates until the currency loses all credibility. When that happens, the economy fragments. Trade collapses. Society simplifies. Rome is not unique. Weimar Germany, Zimbabwe, Venezuela. The mechanics are the same. The time frames differ, but the outcome doesn't. The lesson isn't that empires fall because of currency collapse. The lesson is that currency collapse reveals what's already broken. Rome's military spending had become unsustainable. Its expansion had stopped. Its administrative costs exceeded its productive capacity. The currency collapse didn't cause these problems. It exposed them. When money fails, everything built on that money fails with it. The denarius lasted 500 years. For most of that time, it was stable, trusted, and valuable. The collapse took only 70 years, from the first major debasement under Nero to the near-total collapse under the crisis of the 3rd century. Rome's empire lasted another 200 years after the currency died. But it was a different empire, smaller, weaker, fragmented. The economic integration that had made Rome powerful was gone. The Western Roman Empire ended in 476 AD, but the economy had ended long before that. Currency isn't just metal or paper, it's a measure of trust. When that trust disappears, the systems built on it follow.